So that constant hum of information
Hmm.
feels like it's vibrating in your pocket right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. You open your phone and bam.
Another crisis, another opinion, another thing you feel you need to know.
Mm.
And look, you want to stay informed, you're a curious person, but sometimes it just feels like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
Absolutely. You're looking for that substance, but without the mental drain.
Exactly. And that's what we're getting into today.
Right. Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. How to navigate this relentless news cycle, and maybe more importantly, how to protect your own mental well-being while doing it.
Okay.
And we've pulled together some really fascinating ideas here spanning, well, literally thousands of years.
From ancient philosophy to modern psychology.
Exactly. We've got insights from the ancient Stoics, but also the very latest psychological research on how we interact with all this information, especially the negative stuff.
Sounds like quite a mix.
Right.
What sources are we drawing on?
Well, we've got articles looking specifically at Stoicism as a framework for dealing with news, explorations into that phenomenon we now call doom scrolling.
Oh yeah, doom scrolling. We know that one.
We sure do, and its impact. Then there are these surprising connections between Stoicism and modern therapies like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Interesting.
Yeah, and even some like really raw real-world perspectives from a Reddit discussion where people talked about using Stoicism to cope with anxiety.
Okay, so getting practical too.
Very practical. Plus, we're looking at what major mental health organizations are saying about news consumption's impact. We've got insightful essays connecting Stoicism to what they call digital despair.
Digital despair. That hits home.
Doesn't it? And its role in the digital age generally. And even a really thought-provoking piece on applying Stoic principles to something huge, like climate change.
Wow. Okay, so quite the range. What's our goal here? What's the mission for this deep dive?
The mission is really to synthesize all of this, the ancient wisdom, the modern science, and pull out practical, usable strategies for you.
Strategies you can actually use today.
Exactly. We want to help you become not just, well-informed, but also mentally resilient, so you can engage with the news in a way that actually empowers you instead of leaving you feeling, well, anxious, helpless, and just plain burnt out.
All right, let's do it. Where do we start? Maybe just acknowledging the sheer amount of news.
Yeah, that's the foundation, isn't it? It's almost impossible to overstate just how much news we're exposed to. One of our sources nails it, calling it pretty much ubiquitous.
It really is. It's not just the TV or the newspaper anymore. It's woven into everything.
Mm-hmm. Social media feeds, notifications popping up constantly, websites, magazines. It's just everywhere, vying for our attention.
And this constant access, it has a real downside, doesn't it, for our mental state?
It absolutely does. We looked at research, for instance, in the British Journal of Psychology, suggesting that just being exposed to negative news can trigger this, cascade of negative thoughts.
Leading to more anxiety.
Yes, increased anxiety. And interestingly, it can also make us more likely to interpret completely unrelated things in our own lives negatively, kind of sensationalizing our own experiences.
Wow. So it bleeds over.
It bleeds over. And the Canadian Mental Health Association echoes this, pointing out how negative news directly activates our stress response. There was another study in Health Communication in 2022 that really solidified this link between consuming crisis news and higher emotional distress.
And that constant low-level stress just chips away at you over time.
Exactly. It erodes our resilience. Which brings us neatly to that term you mentioned earlier, doom scrolling.
Right. That endless scroll through bad news that just makes you feel awful.
Yeah, the definition we found is basically spending excessive time online scrolling through negative news that makes you feel sad, anxious, or angry. It apparently started gaining traction around 2019.
And then the pandemic hit.
And it just exploded. It feeds into this kind of morbid curiosity, doesn't it?
It really does. What's the psychology behind that? Why do we do it?
Well, what's fascinating is that it often starts quite innocently. Maybe just wanting to stay informed, or feeling a sense of civic duty.
Like you should know what's going on.
Precisely. But then it twists into this compulsive behavior, this need to keep refreshing, keep scrolling, even though we know it's making us feel worse.
It's like our brains are hunting for threats.
And the internet provides an endless supply. But the irony is, this constant consumption often leads to a decreased sense of control. We feel overwhelmed by problems we can't fix just by scrolling, which just fuels more anxiety.
Okay, this feeling. Being overwhelmed by external stuff. That's not exactly new, is it?
Not at all. And this is where, the ancient wisdom of Stoicism comes in. It offers a really powerful counterpoint.
Let's talk about that. The core Stoic idea, the dichotomy of control.
Exactly that.
Hmm.
As the philosopher Epictetus laid out, and many of our sources really hammered this home, we need to get crystal clear on what's within our power and what isn't.
Okay, so what is in our power, according to them?
Our thoughts, our judgments about things, our intentions, our motivations, our desires, our aversions, basically our own actions and reactions. That's our domain.
And what's not?
Well, pretty much everything else. Our bodies, in terms of health, ultimately, our property, our reputation, what other people think, external events, and yes, the news itself. That all falls into the category of things we don't directly control.
So, from a Stoic perspective, spending hours worrying about the latest headlines, something we can't really influence directly,
Well,
that's considered.
kind of irrational, really. Pointless, almost. It's like getting incredibly worked up about the rain. It's happening. Your anxiety isn't stopping the downpour.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads to another Stoic idea, the discipline of assent.
Yes, absolutely crucial. This is the conscious practice of examining our initial reactions, our first impressions, our judgments about these external events before we fully buy into them, before we assent to them.
So creating a pause, a gap between seeing the news and feeling the feeling.
Exactly. It's about creating that mental space.
Okay, walk me through that. Let's say you see a headline that makes your blood boil instantly or fills you with dread. How does this discipline of assent work there?
Okay, so a Stoic would mentally break it down.
Right.
First, there's the impression. That's just the headline itself, the raw data hitting your awareness.
God.
Then, almost instantly, we slap a value judgment on it. This is terrible, or this is wonderful, or whatever.
Happens automatically, pretty much.
Right. And that judgment and then leads to a proposition in our minds, like this terrible event is going to ruin everything, or this means X, Y, and Z will happen.
Okay.
Now, the critical step, the Stoic move, is assent. Do we actually agree with that proposition? Do we endorse that value judgment? The Stoics argue we have the power to pause right there.
To question it.
Yes, to question that initial judgment, especially, when the news might be hyped up or biased or maybe just plain wrong or unverifiable. It's about realizing our first emotional hit isn't necessarily the whole truth or a rational assessment.
So that gut punch feeling, that immediate despair or anger we get from scrolling, a Stoic would say that's maybe a failure of this discipline. Like we just automatically clicked agree on the negative feeling.
That's a great way to put it. A failure of the discipline, yes. They'd say we've automatically assented without proper scrutiny. The goal is to insert that moment of rational thought.
Like Epictetus said, it's not things themselves, but our judgments about things that disturb us.
Precisely. Our job is to make sure those judgments are grounded in reason, not just knee-jerk reactions. He even talked about how complex impressions can be, how things can appear differently than they are, reinforcing why we need that careful judgment.
This really explains why doom scrolling feels so bad. We're just getting hit with negative impression after negative impression.
And reflexively assenting to the anxiety and hopelessness, yeah. Without much of a filter.
So Stoicism as an antidote to digital despair, as one source put it. That sounds promising.
It really does, because instead of trying to, wrestle the whole world's problems into submission through our phone screen,
Which is impossible.
totally impossible, Stoicism teaches us to focus inward first, to fix our relationship to those problems by managing our internal state and focusing on our own sphere of effective action.
Back to that control versus chaos idea again.
Right back there. We consciously channel our energy toward what we can influence, our thoughts, responses, actions, values, and learn to accept that the 24/7 news beast, with all its unpredictability, is basically in the chaos column, not under our command.
Seneca's line comes to mind. We suffer more in imagination than in reality.
Oh, that's incredibly relevant here, isn't it? Doom scrolling is often pure imagination overdrive, catastrophizing based on headlines.
Yeah.
The dichotomy of control pulls us back from that imaginative suffering, reminding us, focus on now, focus on what you can actually do.
One of the essays mentioned mental asceticism and digital minimalism from a Stoic viewpoint. What does that look like?
It sounds intense, but it's really about creating intentional distance. It draws on Epictetus's advice not to get knocked off your feet by every impression.
Like every single news notification.
Exactly. And it echoes Marcus Aurelius talking about mastering our own minds. It brings in this Stoic concept of prosocia, which is like attention or mindfulness or vigilance.
Being watchful of where your mind goes.
Yeah, consciously choosing where you direct your mental energy. It means practicing deliberate news consumption, deciding what you need to know and when, rather than just passively getting sucked into the endless scroll. Think of it like being a bouncer for your brain.
Huh, I like that. Bouncer for the brain. It's the difference between being a passive sponge for whatever the algorithm feeds you
Right.
and actively deciding, okay, I need this information from this source for this purpose.
Exactly. Passive doom scrolling is basically the opposite of the Stoic call to active, virtuous engagement within your control. Seneca said, confine yourself to the present. Epictetus kept saying, it's your judgments that disturb you.
The essay also mentioned these forgotten Stoic rituals,
Yeah.
morning prep and evening review.
Yes. And think how different that is from grabbing your phone first thing in the morning or scrolling endlessly in bed.
Totally different.
The morning ritual was about setting intentions. What virtues will I practice today? What is within my control? The evening reflection was about reviewing. How did I do? Where did externals sway me? Where did I act according to my values?
That fosters such a sense of purpose, doesn't it? Compared to just reacting to whatever pops up.
It's the difference between intentional living and reactive living.
Okay, so the ancient wisdom provides this really solid framework. How do we make this super practical for today? How do we bridge these Stoic ideas with, say, advice from modern mental health experts?
Well, there are some really clear overlaps. That Stoic focus on what's in our control. It maps directly onto modern advice to set clear time limits for news consumption.
Right, like only check news for 15 minutes twice a day.
Exactly. That's a direct way to reduce anxiety and information overload, something our mental health sources strongly recommend. You're controlling your exposure.
And the Stoic discipline of assent, being critical of our first reactions, how does that connect?
It connects perfectly with the advice to curate your news sources very carefully. Be selective. Prioritize reliable, fact-based journalism. Actively minimize exposure to sensationalism and overly emotional reporting, just as the CMHA suggests. You're controlling the quality of the input.
Choosing what you assent to, in a way.
Precisely. And the Stoic value of pursuing wisdom and understanding. That aligns beautifully with the modern recommendation to seek out diverse perspectives, get information from various sources to avoid those echo chambers that just confirm your biases and maybe heighten your anxiety.
So actively working towards a broader, more nuanced understanding.
Yes. And I really like this connection too. The Stoic focus on virtuous action. This parallels the advice to look for constructive, solutions-oriented journalism.
Instead of just wallowing in the problems.
Right. Actively seek out stories about positive change, progress, potential solutions. This can shift your mindset from helplessness towards empowerment. What can be done?
That feels like a much healthier way to engage.
Definitely. It moves you from being a passive recipient of bad news to an active seeker of constructive possibilities. Also, the Stoic emphasis on self-awareness, knowing your inner state.
That connects to knowing your triggers.
Exactly. Modern advice says, recognize your personal emotional triggers related to the news. If certain topics consistently send you spiraling, consciously limit your exposure to them. It's basic self-knowledge and self-care.
Being honest with yourself. Okay, I can't handle too much of that topic right now.
And that ties straight into the Stoic idea of detachment from externals, recognizing what's outside your control, and the very practical advice to just take breaks. Step away from all media when it gets too much.
It's not ignorance, it's preservation, creating mental space.
Exactly. And our sources on applying Stoicism specifically to the digital age offer some neat techniques.
Oh yeah, like what?
They talk about negative visualization, briefly imagining life without constant connectivity. Not to be morbid, but to appreciate technology as a useful tool, not something absolutely essential for survival or happiness.
Huh, okay, what else?
Mindfulness through journaling. Actually taking a few minutes to write down how your digital interactions, including news, are affecting your mood, your focus, your day.
Becoming more aware of the impact.
Yeah. And the pause principle. Before you fire off an angry comment or get sucked into an online argument, pause. Ask yourself, is this really worth my energy? Is this within my control? Does reacting serve my values?
That pause seems key in so many of these strategies.
It really is. And then there's this idea of digital minimalism through a Stoic lens.
So, like Marie Kondo for your phone.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Decluttering apps, muting non-essential notifications, scheduling specific screen time. It's about treating technology as a tool you wield consciously, not a master that dictates your attention.
Reclaiming control.
Yes. And setting firm boundaries to protect your inner citadel, as the Stoics called it, your mental peace. Saying no to constant online demands, creating tech-free times or spaces, actually embracing silence sometimes.
Even applying a more faddy love of fate. How does that fit digitally?
By accepting the things you can't control even online. Like, okay, the website crashed. Annoying, but not the end of the world. Or letting go of the need to win that pointless Twitter argument. Accepting digital imperfections.
Okay, this is all super helpful for managing the general noise. Let's zoom in on one specific, very common reaction to news: anxiety. How does Stoicism tackle that?
Right. Well, one of the really insightful points from those Reddit discussions we looked at was that Stoicism, at its core, is trying to bring our perceptions and beliefs into line with reality.
Okay.
Anxiety, though, is often described as having a strong neurophysiological component. It's like our body's threat system is stuck in overdrive, so it's crucial to remember that.
So it's not just a matter of thinking differently and the anxiety vanishes, especially if it's severe.
Exactly. The Reddit folks made a great point. Stoic practices can be incredibly helpful, but they work best when you practice them before the anxiety really ramps up. For people with significant anxiety, getting professional medical or psychological support might need to come first. Stoicism can then be a fantastic tool for building resilience alongside that.
Fair enough. But what are some of the Stoic ideas that can help manage anxiety?
A big one is actively examining how rational our fears actually are. The ancient Stoics, for example, really dug into fears like the fear of death. They built logical arguments for why excessive worry about it was unhelpful.
Trying to dismantle the fear with reason.
Yes. The idea is, if you can build a strong rationale for not worrying excessively about the big stuff where worry achieves nothing, it can help you manage the smaller, everyday anxieties triggered by things like news headlines. You question the usefulness of the worry itself.
And meditation or mindfulness came up in those discussions too.
Absolutely. One person mentioned how regular meditation helps them get a handle on those intrusive thoughts that often fuel anxiety. And Seneca's quote is just perfect here. A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary.
Worrying about what might happen.
Exactly. The core Stoic advice is use your reason. Question the causes of your anxiety. Ask yourself honestly, is this anxiety helping me in any way right now?
I'm bringing it back to what you can control, that here and now focus.
That came up again and again. When you feel yourself spinning out about something in the news, future worries, past events, the Stoic move is to gently but firmly pull your focus back to your present actions, your immediate choices. What can I do right now?
I saw one comment that reframed anxiety as energy.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Seeing anxiety not just as a bad feeling, but as the body signaling a need for action, like energy that needs direction. Stoicism then helps you channel that energy towards constructive action within your control, rather than just letting it swirl as worry.
That's a powerful reframe.
Yeah.
But there was a caution too, right? Stoicism isn't just passive acceptance.
Crucial point. One commenter reminded everyone that Stoicism also stresses actively avoiding negative outcomes when possible. It's not about shrugging your shoulders at everything. It's about acting wisely and virtuously where you can make a difference.
Discernment, not indifference.
Exactly. Which leads us to address a common criticism.
That Stoicism might make people too passive, like they'll just disengage from important issues.
Yeah, that's a frequent concern, but our sources clarify that Stoicism doesn't advocate for apathy at all. It actually calls for action aligned with virtue, aimed at the common good, but focused within your actual sphere of influence.
So it's smarter engagement, not less engagement.
Precisely. It's not about not caring. It's about figuring out how to care effectively and sustainably without burning yourself out. As one essay noted, just doom scrolling and feeling terrible isn't empathy. It can actually be a kind of passive surrender to negativity.
Real compassion involves action where possible.
Exactly. Compassion coupled with wise action within your control and acceptance where action isn't possible.
Okay, this connects to a really interesting concept you mentioned earlier, climate stoicism. Applying these ideas to something massive like climate change.
Yeah, it's a fascinating extension. The article we looked at suggests using that core Stoic mental resilience to face the collective challenge of the climate crisis.
How does that work? It seems so overwhelming.
It involves essentially accepting the reality that the future might be difficult, acknowledging potential tragedies, while simultaneously staying completely committed to doing everything possible to mitigate harm.
So decoupling the fight for an outright win from the dedication to just keep doing the right thing, making things less bad.
Exactly that. The author emphasizes that it's never truly too late to act on climate change. Even if we miss certain targets, every single effort to reduce emissions, to adapt, still lessens the overall harm. Every fraction of a degree matters.
Which lines up with the Stoic idea of preparing for the worst, but focusing your energy on your own virtuous response.
Perfectly. It's about accepting the daunting reality without letting it paralyze you with despair. Instead, you focus on taking responsible, ethical action within your power, regardless of the ultimate outcome.
Maintaining commitment and agency even when things look bleak.
Yes. Cultivating that long-term perspective, staying true to your values, and finding meaning in your own actions.
Wow. Okay, let's try to pull all these threads together. After this deep dive into news, well-being, stoicism, psychology,
Mm.
what are the main takeaways for someone listening?
Okay, I think first, it's crucial to just recognize and acknowledge the real impact, the potential negative impact that the sheer volume and negativity of modern news can have on our mental health. Don't underestimate it.
Step one, awareness.
Okay,
Oh,
step
yeah.
two, embrace the Stoic dichotomy of control. Get really clear in your own mind about what aspects of the news and your reaction to it you can actually influence and what you can't. Focus your energy accordingly.
Control what you can control. Makes sense.
Third, practice conscious assent. Create that pause between seeing the news and letting the emotional reaction take over. Question your initial judgments. Choose what you mentally agree with.
Be the bouncer for your brain.
Be the bouncer. Fourth, cultivate digital mindfulness. Be intentional. Set limits, curate your sources, take breaks. Treat technology and news as tools, not masters.
Be deliberate about consumption.
Yes. And finally, maybe overarching all of this is shifting your focus. Move it away from dwelling on the uncontrollable chaos out there and towards managing your own internal responses and taking virtuous, constructive action right here within your own sphere.
So it really seems like while this constant flood of news can feel completely overwhelming,
It often does.
adopting some of these Stoic-informed perspectives, blended with modern insights, can give you real, practical tools. Tools to navigate it all with, well, maybe a bit more calm and focus.
Absolutely. More equanimity, more resilience.
Okay, so that leaves us with the final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, try this. Take a moment, maybe after this, and identify just one thing, one specific area in how you consume news, or maybe just one digital habit you have, where you could consciously apply one of these Stoic principles we talked about today.
Just one small change.
Just one to start. Maybe it's setting a timer before you open that news app. Maybe it's consciously pausing before reacting to that outrageous headline. Maybe it's deciding to have a tech-free dinner table tonight.
And then just see what happens.
Yeah, just observe the impact. Notice how that small shift feels. Really consider how shifting your focus away from the uncontrollable storm of news and towards your own responses, your own actions might lead you to a life that feels not just more informed, but maybe, just maybe, a little less anxious and a lot more centered.